The scent of blooming wisteria and damp earth hung heavy in the air. A fleeting, precious quiet in the heart of Seoul. It was the golden hour in Itaewon, a time when the sun dipped below the Namsan ridges, casting the affluent, multi-tiered neighborhood in a soft, honeyed light. Jungkook stood on the rooftop terrace of his newly acquired house, a masterpiece of minimalist architecture that had cost him nearly 8 billion won. Below, the bustling streets were a distant, muted symphony. Up here, on the pinnacle of his private world, he could almost breathe. This house, this architectural marvel of glass and reinforced concrete, nestled in a secluded, high-security pocket of Yongsan-gu, was supposed to be his sanctuary. It was the physical manifestation of his dreams, a place where the global idol, the golden matinee of BTS, could simply be Jungkook, a man in his late 20s who loved to paint, play guitar, and cook ramen without the scrutiny of millions. He ran a hand over the smooth railing, his gaze drifting over the sprawling cityscape. He'd imagined hosting his members here, having late-night philosophical talks with Namjoon under the stars, or perhaps composing a new track in the soundproof basement studio. He'd even picked out a specific corner for a giant canvas, a blank space waiting for an explosion of paint. But the silence was an illusion. A flicker of movement caught his eye, not on the street, but on the rooftop of a much older, lower building a few hundred meters away. It was barely visible, a small, dark lens reflecting the dying Sunday. It was gone in an instant. A trick of the light, perhaps. No. His gut clenched. He knew that reflection. It was a high-powered telephoto lens, angled with chilling precision at his terrace. He had paid a premium for the privacy the height and location afforded, yet they had found an angle. They always found an angle. He didn't need to check his phone to know. In 20 minutes, a grainy, high-resolution photo of him, merely standing, his profile etched against the sunset, would be circulating on a certain private Twitter account. It would be captioned with a fake, intimate detail. JK is thinking deeply tonight. He looks sad. Does he miss me? It had been 3 months since he moved in, and the initial bliss had curdled into a subtle, constant paranoia. It started with the subtle things. Delivery drivers who lingered too long. The same unmarked black car parked 3 blocks away every morning at 7 a.m. The faint, insistent clicking sound outside his bedroom window at 3 a.m. Even though he was on the second floor of a highly secured home, the house was a fortress, yet he felt more exposed than ever. He was a bird in a gilded cage, and the bars were not metal, but the unblinking, relentless eyes of those who loved him, or so they claimed, with a terrifying, consuming obsession. Jungkook sighed, the golden light turning cold and metallic on his skin. He hadn't painted in weeks. The blank canvas still stood, untouched, a monument to a normal life he couldn't grasp. A sanctuary, he thought, pulling his sliding glass door shut with a solid, echoing thud. No, this is a spotlight. The escape route had been a dream. Now, it was becoming a cold, hard necessity. Chapter 1. The anatomy of an invasion. The incident that finally tipped the scales didn't involve a physical break-in, but a profound psychological violation that cut deeper than any broken lock. It was a chilly Tuesday morning, and Jungkook was in the basement studio, working on a complex vocal arrangement he'd send his security team, a small, discreet unit provided by Hybe, on a mandatory rotation break. He needed solitude to create. He paused the track, sipping lukewarm coffee, and opened his laptop to check the lyrics. That's when he saw it. A small, white piece of paper, folded precisely into a neat square, tucked into the spine of his leather-bound lyric journal. He hadn't left it there. He was meticulous about his belongings. The journal had been on the corner of the large mixing console when he'd arrived 15 minutes ago. His heart began to pound a heavy, erratic rhythm against his ribs. The studio was a sealed environment. The access door required 3 separate codes, and the windows were high-grade, laminated security glass. He unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. Inside, the message was written in neat, elegant Korean script, but the handwriting was utterly unfamiliar. I know you like the jasmine tea you had yesterday morning. The black cat on your terrace is not a stray. I gave her the name Nova because you are my brightest star. Don't worry. I won't tell anyone what you ate for breakfast. A loyal observer, the message wasn't threatening in a violent way. It was chillingly intimate. It implied a level of access and constant surveillance that defied the very design of his secure home. Jungkook felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. The jasmine tea. He had requested a very specific, rare jasmine blend from a small shop in Insadong, delivered just the day before. The black cat, a sleek, friendly neighborhood cat, had indeed started visiting his terrace, and he had been feeding it small portions of tuna, but he hadn't named it. The breakfast. Scrambled eggs in a single, slightly burnt piece of toast. A private, forgettable moment captured and recorded. He stood up so fast, his chair scraped loudly across the floor. He hadn't seen anyone. His security cameras, which he monitored compulsively, hadn't flagged an unauthorized entry. He rushed upstairs, his mind racing. How? He checked the perimeter sensors, the window seals, the door locks all intact. He even checked the air vents, a ridiculous measure. But he was spiraling. Finally, he stumbled into the kitchen, the logical place for the jasmine tea to have been observed. He looked up at the ceiling. The kitchen had a skylight, a large motorized panel of opaque glass designed to flood the room with natural light while preserving privacy. He grabbed a ladder and climbed up, brushing away the fear and vertigo. He peered closely at the skylight's housing, running his hand along the metal frame. There, wedged into a tiny, almost imperceptible gap between the motor casing and the ceiling plaster, was a minuscule device. It was no bigger than a thumbnail, camouflaged with a coat of gray paint and equipped with a pinhole camera lens. It was powered by a solar strip that would charge every time the opaque glass was open. The skylight was an architectural flourish, a symbol of freedom and light. They had turned it into a peephole, a digital spy hole. He ripped the device out, the small wires tearing with a sickening snap. The object felt cheap and insignificant in his palm, yet it held the weight of an entire world, his private world that had just been fundamentally compromised. Jungkook leaned against the wall, the message crumpled in his other hand. It wasn't about the camera, it was about the audacity, the dedication, the fact that someone had scaled his roof, installed this device, and was living, breathing, and observing his most mundane private moments. His phone buzzed. It was his manager, Jungkook. Ah, are you there? The security team found something on a remote drone feed near your property this morning. A civilian drone, hovering suspiciously high above the north side. We've called the police, but it's too late, Young, Jungkook whispered, his voice hoarse. He looked around the sleek, beautiful, yet utterly exposed space. It's all too late. He knew then that the house was poisoned. The luxury, the high-end security, the isolation, none of it could withstand this level of focused, obsessive invasion. The golden cage was suffocating him. He had to leave, not for a break, but permanently. The reason was no longer a question of if the Sasaengs were a nuisance, but of when they would take the final, terrifying step from observation to physical action. Comprehensive plot outline for a 10,000 word narrative. Here is a structured outline for the full-length story, detailing the rise of the surveillance, the internal conflict, the investigation, the final breaking point, and the resolution. Part I. The slow creep, the psychological invasion. Chapters 2 to 4. Establishing the routine and the escalating intrusions. The signs. Detail. The escalating Sasaeng activities not just on his Itaewon property, but also when he leaves, car chases, planted GPS trackers, ordering food to his location when he never gave his address. The conflict. Jungkook's internal struggle. He loves ARMY, but this specific subgroup is draining his soul. He starts to isolate, canceling private outings, only leaving for official schedules. His creativity suffers. The security battle. The story of the security team's relentless, unsuccessful war against the technological and physical ingenuity of the stalkers. Thermal imaging, signal jamming, decoy cars, nothing stops them completely. Part 2. The investigation. Hybe's counterattack. Chapters 5 to 7. The official and unofficial efforts to identify the main perpetrators. The anonymous note. Hybe's legal team gets involved, realizing this is beyond typical fan behavior. The focus shifts to the woman who placed the note she is nicknamed the Observer, the mole theory. Jungkook starts to suspect a small circle of staff or contractors, delivery, construction, repair, must be compromised. As his house blueprints and private codes seem known, this introduces suspicion and further isolation. The data breach. A pivotal moment where a team of cybersecurity experts discovers a sophisticated network of private webcams and compromised accounts used to triangulate Jungkook's movements and even listen to his conversations. The scale is vast. Part 3. The breaking point, the physical threat. Chapters 8 to 10. The event that forces Jungkook's decision to sell and move. The drone incident. A high-speed chase involving a professional-grade drone equipped with a microphone, nearly crashing into his window. The feeling of being hunted, The confrontation. The security team finally catches a perpetrator, a Sasaeng, attempting to enter the property under the guise of a food delivery. The ensuing police report and the chilling, unrepentant deposition from the offender, the house is toxic. Jungkook has a breakdown in the studio. The house, which was meant to be his haven, now feels like a tomb. Every wall has eyes, every room holds a memory of being watched. He decides the monetary value and beauty of the house are irrelevant. The house is psychologically compromised. Part 4. The Escape and Aftermath. Finding New Ground. Chapters 11 to 12 and Epilogue. The Resolution and Reflection. The Secret Sale. The house is quietly listed and sold to a non-celebrity foreign buyer through a shell corporation. All transactions handled by lawyers to prevent the information from leaking. The press statement is intentionally vague, citing investment strategy. The new normal. Jungkook moves into a temporary, ultra-secure apartment, perhaps near the company HQ for convenience and security, where he finds a smaller, more manageable sense of peace. He rediscovers his love for music and painting in a space that feels truly his. Epilogue. The Real Reason. A final reflective chapter where Jungkook affirms that the true reason he left Itaewon was not merely the stalkers, but the profound realization that he was fighting for his humanity. He chose to relinquish a physical asset, the luxury home, to protect an invaluable one, his mental health and right to a private life. Jungkook was in the kitchen, meticulously cleaning his coffee grinder, a small, mundane task that provided a fragile tether to reality. It was late afternoon. The city sounds just beginning to swell with the evening commute. Since the discovery of the digital infiltration, the Itaewon house felt colder, heavier. All smart features were manually disabled. The security system was reverted to an analog, hardwired model, and every single electronic device not essential for his work was removed. The house was now silent, dark, and paranoid. He heard the faint, high-pitched whirring sound first. It was similar to a mosquito, but deeper, more metallic, and rapidly approaching. He dropped the coffee grinder. He recognized the sound instantly. It was the unmistakable hum of a high-power, customized racing drone, far more agile and faster than the surveillance models his team had encountered before. He sprinted to the living room, which faced the largest expanse of glass overlooking the city. The drone was there, a dark, insectile blur against the pale blue sky. It wasn't just hovering. It was performing complex, aggressive maneuvers, rapidly ascending and descending, testing the limits of his glass wall. The sound intensified into a maddening, mechanical shriek as the drone darted straight toward his window, hovering mere inches from the laminated security glass. Jungkook could see the lens of a professional grade 8 Kelvin's camera staring directly at him. But this time, it wasn't just observing. Attached beneath the drone, he saw a small, metallic object, sleek and angular. As the drone stabilized, a thin, needle-like projection extended from the object. A microphone, not an ordinary mic, but a directional parabolic microphone designed to focus on a narrow sound source from a long distance. It was now close enough to record the tremor in his breath, the rustle of his clothes. He backed away, clutching the fabric of his shirt over his chest. He felt like he was being pressed against a wall, physically assaulted by sound and sight. The drone's aggressive movements were not about stealth. They were a deliberate, calculated act of psychological intimidation. I am here, I am watching, and I can get closer than you think. Suddenly, the security alarms, which had been silent for days, erupted in a deafening, shrieking wail. Agent Kwon and 2 security officers, who were positioned in an adjacent safe room, burst into the living area, their faces pale. Imp signal initiated. Get away from the window, Jungkook-si, Agent Kwon shouted, shielding Jungkook with his body. The company's security team had anticipated this escalation and had installed a localized directional electromagnetic pulse emitter on the roof. It was a risky, extreme measure, only to be used in emergencies. A soft pop sound, almost inaudible over the alarms, echoed from above. The drone, now directly in front of the window, immediately went dead. Its rotor stopped mid-spin, and it plummeted, hitting the concrete wall of the house before bouncing onto the grass below with a wet thud. Silence returned, thick and absolute, save for the lingering, high-pitched ringing in Jungkook's ears. The sight of the dead drone, a mangled piece of tech on his manicured lawn, was the most concrete evidence of the threat yet. This was no longer just surveillance. This was an attempted close-quarters breach of his sensory space, designed to terrify him. As the officers secured the remains of the drone, which would provide crucial evidence, Jungkook walked back to the kitchen, his hands trembling violently. He picked up the coffee grinder and looked out the window. The house, meant to be his castle, felt like a glass prison where his attackers could fly reconnaissance missions at will. The fear was no longer abstract. It was physical, tangible, and had just plummeted onto his lawn. Chapter 9. The confrontation. 3 days later, the trap finally worked. The security team had anticipated that after the failed drone attempt, the observer, or their accomplice, would attempt a physical infiltration to retrieve or assess the loss of the expensive equipment. The opportunity came at 2 a.m. Jungkook was awake, sitting in the dark studio, the constant tension making sleep impossible. He was listening to the live audio feed from the hidden sensors Agent Kwon had wired around the perimeter. A faint sound, the scrape of rubber on concrete, came through the headphone. Perimeter breach northwest. Agent Kwon's voice crackled through the intercom. Target moving toward the main entrance. Uniformed as delivery personnel, but they have a full climber harness under the jacket. Jungkook's heart pounded, a frantic drum solo against his ribs. They're here. The intruder, a woman in her late 30s, dressed in an oversized black delivery uniform, had somehow scaled the outer fence. She was moving with professional agility, checking every shadow. She didn't approach the main gate. She went straight for a small, inconspicuous service door near the garage, a detail only someone with the construction blueprints would know. As she reached for the door handle, Agent Kwon, along with 3 plainclothes officers who had been waiting in a modified catering van down the street, surrounded her. The confrontation was swift, silent, and brutal. The woman resisted fiercely, kicking and spitting, screaming not threats, but a stream of fanatical pleas and declarations of love. "He needs me. He is lonely. I know his truth," she shrieked as the officers subdued her with surprising strength. "Tell Jungkook I have his songs. I have the unreleased tracks." Jungkook watched the CCTV feed on his monitor. He saw the manic desperation in her eyes, the terrifying mix of worship and entitlement. This was not a fan. This was a thief trying to steal his very identity. She was taken away, and by morning, the legal wheels were turning. Miss Han was already preparing the airtight case. Trespass, attempted breaking and entering, stalking, illegal surveillance, and wiretapping. The woman's deposition was chilling. She was not the original observer, but a dedicated accomplice, a professional climber and electronics expert who had been hired through a secure, anonymous network. Her client, the one she called the Master, had provided her with the custom equipment, the physical blueprints, the digital access codes, and a massive sum of money. The woman confirmed the digital keys, the thermostat microphones, the skylight camera, and the drone mission. She was simply a hired hand executing the observer's elaborate, all-consuming desire to possess Jungkook's life. The identity of the observer remained shielded behind layers of digital anonymity and legal firewalls, but the physical threat was now clear. The obsession had become a well-funded, outsourced military operation targeting his personal space. Chapter 10. The house is toxic. The Itaewon house was technically safe now. The security flaws were corrected, the accomplice was arrested, and the police were hunting the master. Yet, Jungkook couldn't step into the living room without hearing the drone's terrifying shriek, or look at the skylight without seeing the tiny pinhole camera. He stood in the center of his basement studio. The blank canvas still stood on the easel, a white monolith mocking his lack of peace. He picked up the tube of rare lapis lazuli paint left by the observer's accomplice. It was a beautiful, deep indigo, a color he would have cherished in a different life, but now it was stained with the memory of intrusion. He squeezed the tube until the expensive paint oozed out, not onto a palette, but onto the cold concrete floor. He stomped on it, twisting his heel, grinding the brilliant blue into the gray dust. The house had become toxic. It wasn't the walls, the glass, or the marble. It was the memory. Every corner held a shadow of the person who had been watching him. The kitchen where he made tea, the terrace where he sought silence, the studio where he created all of it, had been claimed and corrupted. Jungkook realized that the true reason he had to leave had nothing to do with the physical damage or the monetary loss. It was about the psychological forfeiture of his personal space. To stay meant living in a constant state of hypervigilance, forever checking for new bugs, forever wondering if the shadows were eyes. It meant the observer, wherever they were, had won the moral victory. They had forced him to live in fear within his own home. He walked upstairs and found Agent Kwon preparing to leave. "Hyung," Jungkook said, his voice flat but resolute. "I need to move out today. Not tomorrow, today." Agent Kwon looked at him, recognizing the hollow exhaustion in the star's eyes. We have the temporary high-rise apartment ready near Hanam. It's a bunker, Jungkook. No access from the building's systems, hardwired security only. Good, Jungkook replied. Get my clothes, my computer, and my art supplies. Leave everything else. The house is compromised. I'm not selling a home, Hyung. I am discarding a crime scene. He left the Itaewon house that evening, just as the sun set. He didn't look back. The luxury home, the symbol of his success, was now a beautiful, empty monument to the dangerous cost of global fame. The reason he left was simple. He chose his sanity over his sanctuary. He was escaping the golden cage. The small, folded square of paper that mentioned Nova lay preserved in an evidence bag on a conference table at the Hybe Legal and Security headquarters. The room was cold, minimalist, and intensely serious. Jungkook sat opposite his primary security chief, Agent Kwon, a man whose quiet intensity was always more reassuring than loud threats, and a formidable lawyer from the company's internal legal team, Ms. Han. The writing analysis is inconclusive, Ms. Han stated, pushing her black-rimmed glasses up her nose. It's neat, educated script, but deliberately generic. No immediate match in our existing files of known repeat offenders. Agent Kwon leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Jungkook. The psychological profile is more telling, Jungkook. This person, let's call her the observer, didn't leave this note as a threat of violence. It was a communication of control. She wants you to know she sees you, that your life is accessible to her. It's a classic Sasaengs power play, but elevated by the fact she breached 3 layers of security to place the note in your personal journal. Jungkook rubbed the bridge of his nose. The memory of finding the note, still a prickle of ice down his spine. It was the detail that got me. The jasmine tea, the black cat. She made my life sound like a script she was writing. And that's our angle, Ms. Han interjected. She craves recognition. She will have told someone, somewhere. The breach itself suggests a non-random targeted effort. Itaewon is high security. Delivery personnel, maintenance, security contractors, someone had to have been compromised. Or she gained access through a very specific, temporary means. They focused on the timeline of the house's construction and recent maintenance. The most vulnerable period was during the installation of the specialized, motorized skylight motor. The exact location where Jungkook found the pinhole camera. Agent Kwon pulled up a series of archived photos and contractor manifests on the screen. We've cross-referenced all personnel who had access to the rooftop 3 weeks prior to the note. We found 23 individuals. Their backgrounds are clean, but we're putting a full surveillance net on them all, starting with the electrical contractor who installed the skylight's automated system. He was on-site alone for nearly 5 hours. Jungkook nodded slowly. The complexity of the security breach was staggering. It wasn't just a fan sitting outside. It was a dedicated, resourceful campaign of surveillance, possibly involving multiple people and compromised insiders. We need to go public with a specific warning, Jungkook suggested, his voice firm. Not a general plea. A clear, legal statement that this is trespassing, surveillance, and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent. We need to cut off the supply of information. Ms. Han shook her head regretfully. We are preparing the legal document. But, Jungkook, be aware. Every time we give them direct acknowledgement, they see it as a win. This is a game of attention. We have to beat them quietly, legally, and definitively. But quietly was proving impossible when the enemy was everywhere. Chapter 6. The Mole Theory. Jungkook returned to the Itaewon house that evening, but it was no longer a home. It was a containment zone. He ordered no food, had his manager buy groceries outside Seoul, and cooked his own simple meals. He even started using a white noise generator in every room to defeat any potential hidden audio bugs. The isolation was suffocating. He sat in his basement studio, trying to work on a track, but every riff, every lyric, felt scrutinized before it even left his mouth. He found himself whispering when speaking on the phone and looking over his shoulder at the empty walls. The investigation into the contractors was going nowhere. Every person interviewed had a solid alibi, and their social media was clean. The mole, if there was one, was a professional. Then came the second intrusion. A small, subtle confirmation of his growing paranoia. Jungkook was painting in his designated corner, finally unboxing the giant canvas. He had always kept his paints in a custom-built, heavy wooden chest with a simple latch. When he opened it, he noticed something was subtly wrong. The tubes of his favorite color, cobalt turquoise, were arranged in reverse alphabetical order. a minute detail he'd never paid attention to, but which his meticulous nature instantly flagged as incorrect. And then he saw it. Tucked beneath the tubes was a miniature, brand new tube of an expensive, rare pigment. Genuine lapis lazuli blue. Another gift. Another message. This one was different, however. This was an invitation, an offering. I know what you like. I want to share your passion. Jungkook's blood ran cold. The wooden chest was never locked, but it was hidden away. This observer wasn't just watching from afar. They were getting close. Uncomfortably. Deeply close. He called Agent Kwon immediately. They're playing with me, Hyung. They touched my paints. My studio is my safe space, and they've turned it into a circus tent. Agent Kwon arrived with a forensics team within the hour. They dusted the chest and the paint tubes. We found something, Jungkook-si, the forensic technician announced, pointing a UV light at the inner lid of the chest, faintly visible. A residue glowed a highly specialized, professional-grade wood sealant used only by the high-end custom furniture company that built the chest. The mole isn't a contractor, Agent Kwon realized, his voice low and tight. It's the delivery or installation team for your bespoke furniture. They knew the latch, they knew the hiding place, and they knew you wouldn't touch the chest for a few weeks. The suspicion shifted. Not to a random construction worker, but to a trusted, highly paid supplier. The financial motive was far greater than mere fandom. This person was likely being paid a massive sum to provide access, data, and blueprints. The mole was a highly skilled professional, selling out their client. Jungkook sat back on the floor, the sense of violation overwhelming. He had trusted the companies, the quality, the security protocols, but every expensive, luxury item he'd bought for privacy was now a potential Trojan horse. Chapter 7. The data breach. The realization that the leak was internal and professional prompted HYBE to bring in a specialized team of external cybersecurity experts. They focused not on physical entry, but on digital intrusion. Their target? The secure servers, holding the architectural blueprints, the electronic door access logs, and the internal security network data for the Itaewon property. 2 days into the deep scan, the lead analyst, a quiet woman named Dr. Lee, requested an urgent meeting. It's far worse than a simple employee leak, Dr. Lee explained, projecting a complex web of digital pathways onto the screen. We found a highly sophisticated zero-day exploit targeted at the proprietary software of your smart home system. The system was designed to allow Jungkook to control heating, lighting, and security remotely. The observer had not just hacked it, she had found a weakness in the core operating system of the house itself. Look at this. Dr. Lee pointed to a flickering red dot on the network map. For the last 2 months, the smart thermostat in the master bedroom has been acting as a networked microphone. It transmits an audio feed every time the ambient noise level rises above 40 decibels. Jungkook felt a wave of nausea. He had spoken to his members, his family, and his doctors in that room. Every private conversation, every whispered worry, every late-night phone call, all had been recorded and streamed. And it gets worse, Dr. Lee continued. The door access logs are not merely breached. They're being manipulated. The system shows that every time you use a specific code, a silent, secondary access protocol is activated. It's a digital ghost key. It doesn't open the door physically, but it sends a notification to an external server telling the observer when you're leaving and when you're returning. This was the solution to the impossible puzzle. The observer wasn't camping outside 24/7. She didn't need to. She had digitally colonized the house, turning the luxury smart home features against him. She knew when he was home, when he was alone, and what he was saying. Miss Han stood up, her face grim. This constitutes multiple counts of illegal wiretapping, corporate espionage, and severe stalking. We have the digital evidence. We can trace the server. We are tracing the server now, Dr. Lee confirmed, but it's masked behind a chain of proxies originating in 3 different continents. The person responsible, the process of selling the Itaewon house, was a covert operation managed by an alliance of legal experts and financial strategists at HYBE. The goal was twofold: achieve the maximum profit for the 8 billion won asset, and, crucially, ensure the transaction provided zero public information about Jungkook's decision to leave. Miss Han, the legal counsel, employed a sophisticated strategy. The house was taken off the public market and offered exclusively to a handful of ultra-high net worth individuals through private banking channels. The official story crafted for any potential leak was simple: investment optimization. Jungkook, a savvy real estate investor, was liquidating one asset to capitalize on a more lucrative opportunity elsewhere. The key was the buyer. They needed a non-celebrity, preferably a foreigner who valued discretion and would not be easily tracked by Korean Sasaeng networks. After weeks of delicate negotiations, the property was sold to an undisclosed foreign tech executive. The final sale price was a substantial sum, reflecting the property's prestige. But the cost to Jungkook's peace of mind was immeasurable. The entire transaction was finalized through a blind trust and a shell corporation, effectively wiping Jungkook's name from the public record of ownership. Jungkook was now living in the new temporary residence, a luxury high-rise apartment in a neighboring district, often referred to by his security team as the bunker. It was the antithesis of the sprawling Itaewon property. It had no garden, no vast rooftop, and the windows offered a view of the sky and other buildings. Not a secluded, easy-to-target landscape, but it was secure. The building had its own dedicated security staff, internal elevator codes known only to residents, and most importantly, a complete absence of the smart home technology that had betrayed him. The appliances were basic. The internet was hardwired, and the only camera was the one he chose to operate. For the first few weeks, Jungkook experienced a peculiar sensation: silence. He could talk on the phone without whispering. He could cook an ordinary meal without wondering if a pinhole camera was streaming his activities. He found himself standing in the center of the room and consciously letting out a deep breath, a physical relaxation he hadn't realized he'd been missing. The Itaewon house was gone, and with it, the pervasive sense of being watched. "The sale is complete, Jungkook-si," Miss Han informed him over a secure line. "The money is deposited, and the keys are with the new owner. They are completely unaware of the events of the last few months. Your connection to the property is erased." Jungkook closed his eyes, feeling a strange mix of relief and melancholy. He had loved that house. He had bought it with the purest intentions of creating a home. But now, it was just a successful transaction. He had bought back his privacy with a multi-billion won exchange. Chapter 12. The New Normal. The investigation into the Master, the Observer, continued with the cooperation of international law enforcement, utilizing the evidence gathered from the drone and the arrested accomplice. While the Master remained elusive, the data breach investigation revealed that the Observer was not a single person, but a syndicate, a highly organized group of dedicated Sasaengs who pooled immense resources to pay for professional hacking and physical surveillance. They were an organization operating more like a criminal enterprise than a fan club. The legal team launched an aggressive, global campaign, targeting the servers and financial accounts that funded the syndicate. They weren't just pursuing the perpetrator. They were dismantling the infrastructure of obsession. Jungkook began to settle into his new environment. The smaller space forced him to focus inward. He no longer felt the need to prove he was safe. He simply was safe. He returned to his art. The giant canvas, salvaged from Itaewon, was too big for the new apartment, so he started smaller. He used the remnants of the lapis lazuli paint, no longer seeing it as a symbol of threat, but as a pigment, a color. He created a series of works dedicated to the concept of thresholds, doors, windows, and the lines between public and private life. One evening, he held a private, unannounced Weverse live stream. He was sitting on a simple rug, his face bare, his hair slightly messy. He didn't mention the house, the sale, or the threats. He simply spoke to his fans, the real army. "I'm really happy today," he said, a genuine smile reaching his eyes. "I'm working on new music, and I'm finding a lot of inspiration in the quiet moments. It's important to have a space that is truly yours, right?" He picked up his guitar and started strumming a melody he'd been working on, a gentle, introspective track about finding peace after a storm. The fans, recognizing his relaxed demeanor, responded with messages of love and support, flooding the chat with hearts and purple emojis. There was no paranoia, no frantic speculation, just genuine connection. He realized that the vast majority of ARMY cherished his well-being, not his location. The house in Itaewon had been a symbol of his global success. This apartment, this small, secure bunker, was a symbol of his personal survival. He had traded a piece of real estate for the right to simply exist as Jeon Jungkook. Epilogue. The true cost. Years later, the question still lingered in the deepest corners of the internet. The reason why BTS's Jungkook left his luxury home in Itaewon. Was it because of too many stalkers divided by Sasaengs? The official narrative remained the same: investment strategy and portfolio diversification. But the truth, known only to Jungkook, the members, and a handful of trusted staff, was profound and absolute. Jungkook was on a world tour, sitting in a quiet dressing room before a stadium show. He was sketching in a small notebook, drawing the outline of a simple, closed door. He had learned a difficult lesson in that golden cage. The moment the line between fan dedication and criminal obsession is crossed, the celebrity's life becomes a war zone. The luxury house was the battleground, and the Sasaengs had weaponized his love for his fans, turning his privacy into their prize. He wrote a short note beneath the sketch. "I didn't leave Itaewon because of the house. I left because I realized that the price of owning that beautiful space was the forfeiture of my own soul. They forced me to choose between a gorgeous house and a free mind. I chose the latter. The true cost of fame isn't the work, the travel, or the exhaustion. It's the constant battle to preserve the small, quiet space where you are just you." Jungkook closed the notebook. He stood up, adjusted his microphone, and walked toward the roar of the crowd, ready to give them the performance of a lifetime. He knew where he was going. He just finally knew where he was coming home to. A place where no one was watching. The bunker apartment was spacious, but its lack of character, generic white walls, corporate-issue furniture was initially jarring after the bespoke artistry of the Itaewon house. Yet, in this sterile environment, Jungkook began to detoxify his mind. He set up his salvaged art corner in the spare room. The massive canvas he had abandoned in Itaewon now rested against the wall, too imposing to face yet. Instead, he worked on a series of small, intensely personal pieces. One piece in particular dominated his focus: the quiet room. It was an oil painting depicting a simple, empty chair bathed in the cool light of a window that showed only the sky. There were no objects, no personal effects, and the walls were a calming, indeterminate shade of gray. It was a space defined by absence. As he worked, his longtime producer, PD Nim, visited. The producer knew nothing of the Sasang terror, only that Jungkook had suddenly moved and seemed creatively drained. "You haven't sent me any new demos in weeks, Jungkook." "Ah," the producer said gently, sipping tea. "Is the new space not inspiring?" Jungkook stepped back from the canvas, wiping paint on his jeans. "It is, Hyung, but differently. Itaewon, it was too loud, too much of a statement. I was trying to live up to the house, instead of the house living up to me." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Here, the only sound is what I make. The security is tight, Hyung, really tight. I feel like I can finally breathe a melody without someone else claiming they wrote the harmony." The producer observed the quiet room, sensing the deeper meaning. "It's beautiful, but why is it so empty?" "Because," Jungkook explained, tracing the outline of the painted window, "the greatest luxury I've earned is the right to choose what enters my life. And for a long time, I didn't have that choice. The emptiness is the proof that the invasion is over." That day marked a creative turning point. Jungkook began composing again, not the stadium-shaking anthems, but soft, layered tracks that felt like whispers in the dark music that could only be written in true solitude. He started a personal vlog series on an encrypted, private cloud, filming mundane things, making kimchi jjigae, doing a complicated workout, or just talking to his dog, Bam, who was, in this fictional timeline, living with him. The content was for his own therapy, a way to re-establish the reality that his life was normal and whole, even if no one else saw it. He was reclaiming the mundane, the very details the observer had stolen and twisted into weapons. The Sasaengs had tried to turn his life into a performance. He was taking it back by making it intensely, beautifully ordinary. The final act of reclaiming the Itaewon space came when he saw the first real estate photo of the completed, reconstructed house posted by the new owner's brokerage. The modernist lines were still stunning, but a new, heavy privacy fence had been erected, taller and more fortified than anything Jungkook had installed. It was completely impersonal. A beautiful, cold investment property. Good, he thought, without regret. Let it be an investment. It was never a home for me. The loss of the house was a financial footnote, but the gain, the simple, unquantifiable feeling of being safe when he walked from his bedroom to his kitchen, was the richest return he could have hoped for. He picked up a tube of paint and approached the large, intimidating canvas from Itaewon. He would not paint a door or a window, he would paint a star field, an infinite space, where the concept of a boundary was irrelevant. Expanded epilogue. The cost of the name. Jungkook sat backstage in a stadium in London, the bass of the soundcheck thumping through the floorboards. The world tour was a success, and he was mentally healthier, buoyed by the genuine love of millions. He was Skyping with Agent Kwon, who had become a friend and confidant. "The case is closed, Jongguksi," Kwon confirmed. "The foreign police cooperation helped dismantle the syndicate, as we called them. They were a network operating globally, funded by wealthy individuals who treated your life like a subscription service." The observer was an older woman, a former tech CEO, living in anonymity. She pleaded guilty to wiretapping and conspiracy charges. The money was the key. She saw your life as the only thing she couldn't buy, so she tried to steal it. Jungkook absorbed the information without shock. The anonymity had protected her for years, allowing her to project her own fantasies onto him. He never cared about her identity. He cared about the act, and the reason why I left Itaewon, Jungkook mused, looking into the webcam. What was the official statement in the end? We maintained the investment optimization narrative, Kwon replied with a slight professional smile. And we reinforced it by leaking a story about your subsequent purchase of a commercial property, another investment. No one connects the sale to the stalking. The public story is that the golden magnate is a real estate genius. But the real reason, Jungkook whispered, almost to himself, the true reason was the erosion of my identity. He leaned closer to the screen, his gaze intense. When I was in that house, I wasn't Jungkook. I was a commodity called Jungkook. My privacy was a consumable good for them. Every time they recorded me, they stripped away a piece of my humanity. I had to abandon that luxurious house because it was the physical representation of that commodity. A golden cage built for Jungkook the idol, not Jungkook the person. He picked up his notebook and flipped to the last page, the drawing of the closed door. The house was toxic not because they entered it young, but because they made me believe that nowhere was safe. Leaving Itaewon wasn't just a move. It was a defiant act of self-preservation, a refusal to let my own home become a permanent monument to fear. Jungkook closed the notebook with a quiet snap. He understood now. The Sasaengs didn't want him dead. They wanted him exclusively, living out their desired narrative. He had to destroy that narrative by disappearing from the stage they had set. He stood up, the roar of the stadium, now a welcoming wave of sound. The security here was discreet, professional, and felt like a shield, not a fence. He was surrounded by millions, yet finally, truly alone, in the best sense of the word. He was free to be the person who walked onto the stage, and the person who walked off it. He was free to live in a smaller, plainer apartment, knowing that the walls only contained him and his own chosen secrets. He had walked away from a masterpiece of architecture, but he had walked toward the masterpiece of his own, unguarded life. The transition from the sprawling Itaewon house to the high-rise apartment, which Jungkook privately named the bunker, was a seismic shift in his life's geography. In Itaewon, space was limitless. His world spread out with terraces and grand views. In the bunker, the space was contained, precise, and secure. Yet initially, it felt claustrophobic. Jungkook found himself performing strange, obsessive rituals. Every night before sleeping, he would meticulously check the air vents, the smoke detectors, and the power sockets, running his fingers over the plastic, expecting to feel the cold, hard lens of another tiny camera. He knew, intellectually, that the building had been swept clean by a military-grade security firm and was now protected by analog systems. But the paranoia was a deep-seated trauma that refused to heal. He spoke about this tentatively during a therapy session, a mandatory, private meeting arranged by HYBE's mental health team. The fear isn't about the Sasaengs anymore, he confessed to the doctor. It's about the space itself. Itaewon was a physical object I owned, but they took ownership of my emotional connection to it. Now, I feel like I'm constantly drawing lines in the sand, trying to figure out where Jungkook ends and the observation begins. The doctor called it geographic trauma, the psychological scar left when a place of sanctuary is fundamentally violated. To counter this, Jungkook started a new personal project, mapping. He bought massive, detailed street maps of Seoul, not to navigate, but to color code. Red represented areas associated with being followed or intrusive encounters, yellow for places that felt neutral but required caution, and finally, purple for the few, precious places where he felt truly unobserved. His family home, the HYBE dance studio, which was sterilely professional, and his current apartment. The map was alarmingly sparse on purple. Itaewon, his former neighborhood, was a deep, angry red. He realized the stalkers hadn't just invaded a house, they had invaded his entire city. Seoul, the place he called home, had been transformed into a surveillance grid. One rainy afternoon, he revisited his old creative space, the massive canvas he'd been struggling with. He had started to paint the star field, but the stars looked cold and distant. Suddenly, he saw it. The stars were not points of light. They were pinpricks in the darkness, like the lenses of tiny cameras. The entire canvas became a horrifying reflection of the feeling he couldn't shake, that even the heavens were watching him. Frustrated, he grabbed a large brush and smeared a thick, turbulent layer of dark, oil-based paint across the center of the canvas, obliterating the nascent star field. He stepped back, breathing heavily. The smeared blackness was ugly, visceral, and honest. It was the color of the Sasaengs' actions, a chaotic void that swallowed all light and safety. Later that evening, he forced himself to do something he hadn't done since moving. He ordered delivery. He used an assumed name, paid in cash, and had the deliveryman meet him in the lobby, watched closely by Agent Kwan. The simple act of ordering food was an act of war against his own fear. When the warm, ordinary bowl of jajangmyeon arrived, Jungkook didn't eat it immediately. He stared at it, an object of pure mundanity, untainted by the sinister knowledge of its journey. He ate slowly, deliberately, savoring the taste. It was an act of reclaiming the normal, one spoonful at a time. He was fighting his trauma by forcing his body to trust the world again, piece by physical piece. Chapter 15. The Doctrine of Distance. The final legal resolution of the Itaewon case was met with fierce internal debate at HYBE. Miss Han argued for a public press conference, revealing the full extent of the Sasaeng syndicate's crimes to scare off future perpetrators. The PR team vehemently objected, fearing it would only encourage a new generation of stalkers seeking to achieve the infamy of the observer. Jungkook was the tiebreaker. He sat silently in the room, listening to the arguments. "No press conference," he finally stated, his voice quiet but firm. "No infamy, no fuel." He looked at Miss Han. "The Sasaengs committed crimes because they felt entitled to my life. They justified their actions by their love for Jungkook. If we give them a grand public stage, if we make them martyrs, we reward the behavior. We must treat this not as a public drama, but as a tedious, unglamorous crime." He proposed a doctrine of distance, silence. No public acknowledgement of the stalking, the sale, or the move beyond the initial vague investment narrative. Precision, aggressive, discreet legal action taken against any individual caught trespassing or surveilling, with zero tolerance and maximum prosecution, but all kept out of the media. Redirection. Publicly, Jungkook would double down on his art and his music, showing the world a vibrant, creatively thriving idol who was unaffected by the chaos. This doctrine was implemented immediately. The full 1,000-page police and legal file detailing the wiretapping, the drone, and the conspiracy was sealed. The story of the Itaewon house died quietly in the financial pages. The doctrine of distance was Jungkook's way of fighting back without giving his enemies the attention they craved. He realized that the greatest power a celebrity has is the control of their narrative, and the greatest weapon the Sasaengs wield is the ability to force the star to acknowledge them. By refusing to name the problem, he was taking away their oxygen. The creative results of this new security were immediate and profound. He finished the turbulent canvas, not by fighting the black smear, but by accepting it. He used a palette knife to scratch through the black oil paint, revealing flashes of the original, innocent starfield beneath. The result was a textural, conflicted piece, beautiful, but scarred, a true reflection of his soul. He composed a new solo track, a deep house, slightly melancholic song about finding light in the small, sealed spaces. He wrote about the sound of his own breath, the echo of his footsteps in an empty hallway, and the relief of a locked door. It wasn't about fame, it was about fortitude. This song, titled The Bunker, would go on to be a massive success, praised for its raw, vulnerable intimacy. The world heard the music and felt the authenticity. They didn't know the house he had escaped. They only heard the man who had survived. The Itaewon house, the golden cage, was now a distant, terrible dream. The real victory was not the successful sale, but the quiet, everyday life he was building, brick by invisible brick, in the unglamorous, high-security walls of the bunker. He was finally, truly, Jeon Jungkook, artist, musician, and, most importantly, a person with an impenetrable home. 5 years had passed since the sale of the Itaewon house and the implementation of the doctrine of distance. The house itself was a faded memory, merely a profitable anecdote in his financial history. The Sasaeng syndicate was dismantled, and the Observer, the former tech CEO, served a prison sentence. Her reign of digital terror ended. Jungkook was now in his early 30s, a mature artist with a decade and a half under the relentless spotlight. He was no longer the golden maknae, but simply Jungkook, a title heavy with experience, vulnerability, and resilience. He had moved again, this time purchasing a low-profile villa on the outskirts of Seoul, surrounded by dense, natural landscaping and protected by a nondescript, fortress-like perimeter. It was a place chosen for its camouflage, not its flashiness. One chilly evening, he was reviewing architectural plans for a new personal gallery he planned to build near his home, a space purely for his painting. His current security chief, a woman named Miss Choi who specialized in counter-surveillance psychology, entered his study. "Jungkook, I have something I think you should see," she said, placing a thick, digitally printed binder on his desk. It was the translated transcript of the observer's final parole board hearing. He hadn't requested it, but Miss Choi believed facing the source of his trauma, even years later, was a necessary step toward absolute closure. He opened the binder reluctantly. The observer's words were chillingly rational, almost academic in their pathology. "I never harmed him physically. I simply treated his life as a fascinating, complex piece of performance art. The real tragedy is that society permits such an imbalance. The absolute freedom of the star to inspire, and the absolute denial of the fan to participate fully. My method was extreme, yes, but it was born from the desire to dissolve the distance. I believed that by knowing his mundane life, the tea, the cat, the arguments, I was truly appreciating the artist, not the brand. I was paying the price for intimacy." Jungkook read the last line multiple times, a cold realization washing over him. The Sasaengs didn't just want attention, they wanted intimacy at zero cost. They wanted to skip the years of dedication and hard work he poured into his craft and jump straight into the unguarded moments of his soul. He put the binder down. He didn't feel rage, only profound, pitying exhaustion. He realized he had been fighting an abstract concept. The illusion of ownership. The selling of the Itaewon house was not just a security measure. It was the metaphorical act of saying, "You cannot own the place where I bleed, where I dream, where I am weak." He turned to Miss Choi. "Itaewon taught me that the walls aren't the boundary. I am the boundary. And if the walls are compromised, I must retreat and rebuild the boundary within myself." He then talked about the real, lingering cost of that experience. "The house cost me 8 billion won," he mused. "But the trauma cost me the ability to ever look at a camera, even my own phone camera, and believe it's just recording me. I have to perform the safety now. I have to look normal, even when I feel exposed." This was the truth he had never fully vocalized. The performance of normalcy. Every live stream, every spontaneous video, every moment of perceived vulnerability was now a highly calculated, post-trauma broadcast. He had to show the world his peace, even if it took a lifetime to truly feel it. However, the dark experience also sharpened his perception of true army. He remembered the flood of genuine, simple messages after the release of The Bunker, messages that praised the music, not his furniture, his clothes, or his location. Those were the fans who loved the art, not the access. They respected the closed door. He picked up a finished painting, resting on an easel nearby, a vivid, swirling galaxy, painted entirely in deep purples and blues. It was the original Starfield idea, finally realized. But this time, the stars were warm, radiating light, and there were no pinhole cameras. It was limitless and safe. This painting was the final symbol of his victory. He had taken the geography of his fear and transformed it into a masterpiece of his inner sanctuary. Jungkook smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "Miss Choi," he said, gesturing to the architectural plans, "let's build that gallery, and let's name the first exhibit The Quiet Room." The story of the luxury home in Itaewon would forever be a cautionary tale within the company, a reminder that the fight for privacy is endless. But for Jungkook, it was the foundation of his deepest truth. He had left the golden cage, not because the bars were too tight, but because he finally realized he had the key all along. And the freedom he sought was not outside the walls, but deep within the quiet, guarded space of his own heart. A year after the successful launch of his The Quiet Room art exhibit and the release of The Bunker, the 7 members of BTS gathered for an informal dinner at an undisclosed, highly secure private venue in Seoul. It was the first time they had all been physically together in a non-work capacity since the Itaewon incident had peaked. The atmosphere was jovial, filled with shared memories and inside jokes. But there was an underlying current of tension, the unspoken knowledge of what Jungkook had privately endured. Jimin, always the most attuned to Jungkook's emotional state, caught his eye during a lull in the conversation. "You seem lighter, Jungkook." "Ah," he noted softly. Jungkook smiled, a genuine crinkle around his eyes. "I am, Hyung. The air in the new place doesn't taste like metal anymore." The metaphor was understood instantly. The metal taste was the scent of constant paranoia, the metallic tang of fear and surveillance. Namjoon, the leader, shifted in his seat, his expression thoughtful. He had been privy to the legal battles and the full security reports from Agent Kwon. "We should have been better, Jungkook." He admitted, his voice low. "We were too focused on the external fight, the music, the concerts, the business, and we missed the war being waged inside your walls." Taehyung, sitting beside Jungkook, gently placed a hand on his arm. "The hardest part of the stardom, I think," he said, "is realizing that the thing that connects you to the world, our music, our message, is the same thing that creates the people who want to break down your door." Jungkook shook his head. "No, Young, it's not the same thing. That's what I learned in Itaewon. True army loves the message. They love the distance because it preserves the message. The others, the observer and her syndicate, they didn't want the art. They wanted the reality to destroy the art. They wanted to prove that the man was less than the legend, and by proving it, they felt closer to the legend." Yoongi, who usually reserved his counsel for creative matters, spoke up, his tone rare and serious. "The house, then, was an expensive lesson. It was a failure of security, but a success of the spirit. You walked away from a multi-billion won asset to save something priceless." Seokjin, with his characteristic blend of humor and sincerity, added a practical layer. "And now you live in a place so secure, I need 4 different codes and a retinal scan just to bring over pizza. You've officially achieved bunker status." The room chuckled, breaking the heavy mood. But Jungkook appreciated the levity. They understood. They were the only ones who could truly comprehend the specific, gilded terror of being a global idol. He looked around at their faces, his brothers, his true anchor. "The greatest defense I have now," Jungkook said, holding up his glass, "isn't a new alarm system or a taller fence. It's the knowledge that when the whole world is trying to make me feel like a commodity, I have 7 people who remind me I'm just Jungkook." He lifted his glass higher. "To the quiet rooms, to the closed doors, to the freedom we fight for every day." They raised their glasses in unison, the toast not just to Jungkook, but to their shared, enduring commitment to protect the small pockets of normalcy they had desperately carved out of their extraordinary lives. The Itaewon house was gone, but the lesson it imparted, the absolute necessity of the boundary, was a permanent foundation beneath their shared journey. A year after the successful launch of his The Quiet Room art exhibit and the release of The Bunker, the 7 members of BTS gathered for an informal dinner at an undisclosed, highly secure private venue in Seoul. It was the first time they had all been physically together in a non-work capacity since the Itaewon incident had peaked. The atmosphere was jovial, filled with shared memories and inside jokes. But there was an underlying current of tension, the unspoken knowledge of what Jungkook had privately endured. Jimin, always the most attuned to Jungkook's emotional state, caught his eye during a lull in the conversation. "You seem lighter, Jungkook." "Ah," he nodded.